2 buys or something, yeah.
They don't play.
Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the March 5th, 2019 Post Falls City Council meeting. Shannon, please note that all council members are present with the exception of Councillor Thorson, who is excused tonight. Ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and presentations. We've got a couple. Trustees approved the levy proposals for March 12th. The Post Falls School District Board of Trustees approved a resolution for a $19 million bond that we use to build a new elementary school, that will be used to build a new elementary school and improve 5 existing schools. The board also approved a resolution for a 2-year supplemental maintenance and operation levy for a total of $9.91 million. The bond requires 2/3 majority to pass, while the levy requires a simple majority to pass. You can look up your polling place on the school district websites, and City Hall will be one of the polling places. And again, that is next Tuesday, March 12th. And in light of all the comments and challenges all cities have had with snow plowing, with the snow we've had, I wanted to read an email I received. It says, "Dear City of Post Falls, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the City of Post Falls. 2 services that the City of Post Falls is providing has bettered my life to a very high degree. For one, our new snow plows that do not leave a berm in our driveways has completely changed my life. Said dramatically, but true. As a person with health issues, there were days when I could not get out of the driveway, and so had to cancel doctor appointments and make do with what I had in my pantry. Other times, I would pray for a teenager to come to the door with a shovel to offer to shovel me out. Now I don't have to worry about it. It is such a blessing. The other thing I'm deeply grateful for is the daily plowing of the Centennial Trail system, as I use it most days. Without it, well, I would be stuck at home on the roads, which are too dangerous to traverse. Thank you for caring about our citizens and their well-being. So sincerely, Corlisa Berry." So there are issues, but again, John, everybody's involved. Thank you very much for all your efforts. And this is a learning year with snow gates. We've had challenges, we've had issues. You guys have responded well. Hopefully we tweak our plan, and I'd say hopefully we'll do better next year, but maybe we won't get as much snow next year. So, but if we do, I think we'll be better prepared. So thank you all, everyone who's involved with that. There is an amendment to the agenda tonight, correct?
Yes, we are requesting to remove from consent calendar item D, MOU between the Post Falls Police and surrounding agencies to enter into a mutual aid compact.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Shannon, please take the roll.
Wolf,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Are there any declarations of conflict tonight? Seeing none, would you please present the consent calendar?
Item A is minutes, February 19th, 2019. Item B is payables, February 12th through February 25th, 2019. Item C is Crown Point 7th Edition Subdivision Plat application. Item E is Howell Sewer Interceptor, Union Pacific Pipeline Crossing Agreement. Item F is Post Falls Little League Scoreboard Upgrade Memorandum of Understanding. Item G is purchase of Microsoft SharePoint and Nintex workflow form software. Item H is wastewater capacity replacement fee agreement with Post Falls Hotels, LLC, also known as Templins. And item I is Idaho Street to Bay Street pedestrian access additional funding.
And I know we have one question, question on the consent calendar, Mr. Anthony.
Yeah, I have one question. This will probably be for Brian, wherever you are. In the staff report, it was stated the amount that would be deposited in the Post Falls Little League account is $10,000, but in the MOU it's $8,500. So
Okay.
I don't know if we're making money there or but
The MOU would be the correct amount
okay,
on
the
that,
8,500.
so, yes.
Okay.
I have an additional question on that topic too. Who ends up owning the scoreboard?
We would own the scoreboard.
Because the MOU doesn't explicitly state that.
It does not, but it's improvement to city property, so
Okay, so as long as they're covered by statute, because I'd hate to have a,
that'd be a question for Warren.
what you could do, I think Brian's come back later and just have them send a letter and donate it to the city, have the Park and Recreation Commission accept it as a donation, then the commission would recommend to the council to accept the donation from Little League of 2 scoreboards. Then it would be all
Mr.
legal.
Wilson, that work for you?
It works.
I just
You're
hate to,
going to be seeing a second agreement with Little League coming forward in the near future as well. That's addressing more broadly how they use the field, so it may be captured there as well.
I just hate to see a fight at some, not that it would ever happen, but, you know, if something ever did go sour and somebody's trying to tear a scoreboard out of the ground claiming they own it, and it just get ugly fast. So,
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
I had a question for Brian.
Go ahead.
Too, on that same subject, on the Little League, whether it was 10,000 or 8,500, I had that same question, but do we have an idea how much they use per year? Because it was to offset fees for only 2 years. Do they use 85?
Generally, that'll be based on historic use in the agreement that Warren and I are working with Little League to draft. That'll basically accomplish those fees for the 2-year period of time.
Okay.
In general, the structure of that MOU that's forthcoming is $3,500 a year for city and some select school facilities, because we are the administrator over those through a secondary MOU with our interlocal agreement for the school district. So we program those facilities along with some gym spaces, but as it relates to Little League, $3,500 a year gives them some dedicated use of facilities, and then if they go at and above those existing facilities that are outlined in that, then they pay a percentage of the established field fee schedule.
So we're probably more than likely they're gonna eat up that 8,500 in that 2 years.
Correct.
Because I just didn't want to get into a situation where they come back and they still say, well, we only use 7,000, so do we get that 1,500 carryover?
Yeah, we extended it out to the 2 years in hopes that it would all be eaten up in that 1 year.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not on that subject, but I did have a question.
Thanks,
on
Brian.
The item G, the software, purchase software.
And I have notes on that, so we'll see if
Okay.
I can answer.
I guess my question was, it did say in the memo that it's been 8 years since we upgraded that software.
The M files, yes.
Yeah. That seemed like a long time for that type of software to own that. I mean, were we like patching things together or was it just had pretty much gotten to its end of its useful?
It's kind of gotten to the end of its useful life. We were never able to fully implement the software because of some issues with that and with the usability of the software. And they were going to move to a new program where it was going to cost us, I think it was approximately $30,000 a year just for the support of the software. So in looking at the software, it doesn't do exactly what we need it to do, and it can't do workflow at all. And then the fact that they were going to the $30,000 a year, we started looking at different software programs. We've been looking at SharePoint for several years, but once they allowed us to put Nintex with it to do the easy forms, so we'll be able to do our accounts payable on fully electronically, any kind of like reservation forms, anything that requires double sign-offs or personnel action forms, stuff like that will all be able to be done electronically through Nintex. And so with them coupling with Nintex, it's really made it a much more usable software for us.
Okay. Do we have an idea how long we could forecast this software is going to last us, or?
So I think SharePoint will last a lot longer. NIC has been using it for, how long did we say we were using the other 8 years?
8 years.
So they've been using it about 10 years. They had it for a couple of years before we went to M-Files because we originally looked at SharePoint before we bought the M-File program.
I would assume they would do periodic updates to the program.
They are.
as
It's a
well.
Microsoft product, so it's kind of like Word and Excel where they want to keep their software as a usable software ongoing.
Yeah. Okay.
And there is a maintenance fee that we would pay every year for those upgrades too.
Okay. Lastly, on item H, I was a little confused about that whole situation with Templins as far as why it had been such a long time since we had, I don't know, assessed them or whatever.
So with Templins, typically what happens is when a property applies for a tenant improvement in this situation, they're going to be doing some lobby improvements, is when it triggers the review period. We don't typically go back and review the wastewater and water usage, and as we are currently charging on those service units, until an application is filed. So that's what happened here, was that the last time they had applied for an application with the building department was in 1995. Prior to that, it was 1988 on the building in question. So we had to go back to the 1988 period where they had stated 600,000, or we had determined 600,000 gallons was the peak month. And so we had to reevaluate, and it was over 1 million since 2002 for their peak month. So we went with 2018 numbers and are moving forward with that. There is some discrepancies in the numbers, so we are working with them to try and figure out where some of this water may be going. Some of it may be going through an irrigation system, and in which case it's not going back to the sewer, so that would need to be metered and could be deducted from this cost. We did find, or staff did find with them, that there was also a condensing unit that was being metered how it shouldn't have been metered, exact opposite. It should have been metered as a deduction, but it was being double billed essentially. So that'll be pulled off of this. So those numbers that are in this may ultimately change, but we needed to be able to work with them to have worst case scenario essentially moving forward so that we could sign off on the building permit. So that's why it's here.
I guess what prompted my question too was just that time, whether we should trigger that at a tenant improvement, or whether we should say tenant improvement or 5 years.
Yeah, and that's absolutely
10
something.
years, because 1995 was.
Right. It was a long time ago, absolutely. No, and I think that this does beg the question as to whether or not occasionally this should be looked at in a certain realm, especially with commercial properties or larger ones and stuff like that. So, but, we typically look at it, and ultimately it comes from, we could probably work with Public Works and see if we can find, some ways to do reviews more often. But usually, with buildings, they do upgrades. You do see that frequently. Businesses do that. This just happened to be one of those that hasn't for many, many years. So,
Yeah. Is that something you guys could talk about and bring it back to us, as far as?
we could try and figure out some reporting method to do that, or I can work with finance as well and see what we can do. So,
That'd be great.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Stephen, had a question?
Yeah, and I believe my last question is on the consent calendar, number I, the Idaho Street to Bay Street pedestrian access additional funding. Is that tied to number 7 in the budget amendment?
Yes.
That's got additional funding on top of my.
So it's additional funding on top of what's in the budget amendment. We just
Okay.
got notification from the state of the final amount. And so there was an additional 11,000 above what Jason had received when we'd already done our public hearing notification.
So we would, if we approve the budget amendment, will we need to come back and amend it for this amount?
Are you just pulling this out of,
There'll be enough in the 11,000, we have enough to cover that, but I wanted to get this portion of the.
yeah, so we have enough in our reserves to where we don't have to, well, we're going to move it around within the budgeted dollars that we currently have.
Okay, that was.
Good.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Bob. Any other questions? That entertain a motion?
Move to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We do have one public hearing tonight, and it is the budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2019. I will open the public hearing. And I would say that if anybody wishes to testify on this, there's a form on the dais. Please fill it out and turn it into our clerk.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the first budget amendment I have for fiscal year 2019. And the majority of these projects have already been approved by council. I just need to do some housekeeping items and go back and follow up with the budget. We had it currently within, I just needed to make it formal, and so when we go and actually expend the line items we're using, it's allocated within the budget. It's also coming out of reserves or whatever the funding source is. Okay. Okay, there are two items out of the general fund. The first one is the $548,000. That is for the Idaho to Bay Street pedestrian path that has come up. And of that, the majority of that's going to be grant dollars, but I still need to budget the total project expenditures in total. The second of that is it's called the General Fund Designated Fund. And in there, that's 1.5 million. Out of that is the personnel fund. I had reserves set aside in that fund over the years of not having the insurance bills being as high as we had anticipated. So there had been an accumulation of funds within the personnel budget. And so instead of transferring those funds back to the general fund, I'm just constructing the PD wireless, or the PD communication system within that fund. And so that's essentially, since it's funded from general fund, I'm just going to have that constructed in the 003 fund. So the total project for the police department is 1.5 million. We go down to the next one for the 911 support. There are, in the 911, there are grants of 256,000. 256,000 is coming out of fund balance. 225,000 are going to be from grant monies, and 115,000 is also grant monies. Those need to be budgeted before we could expend them. And some of the money had come in prior years, and so the project didn't get completed. So that's why we're using fund balance for the 911 support. And let's see, the next one is going to be for park impacts fees of the 2.6 million. There's currently enough dollars in that fund for actual projects to be completed this fiscal year. And so the projects they're going to look at are the sports complex, Tullamore, potential land acquisitions, the community garden, sports fields, and Crown Point Park. So in that fund, there'll be $2.6 million. And also, while I was going through the budgets, I was looking at the sanitation budget. We have exceeded what we had budgeted in prior years. So I'm just truing up what we actually spend in that fund. The fund in 700 actually has enough fund balance to cover that. So I just need to make sure that what we actually pay our vendor for sanitation is what actually we spend out of that fund. So looking at the total budget amendment of $5.6 million.
Jason, I have a question on the sanitation.
Okay.
I was reading your memo, and it says the budget regarding the contract for Post Falls sanitation needs to reflect the amount paid to the vendor.
Yeah.
Which would be Post Falls sanitation.
Correct.
It says historical costs paid to the Post Falls sanitation have exceeded the amount remitted to the contractor. So that confuses me. It says the amount you've paid them exceeds the amount we've paid them.
I'm sorry, that should have been the amount that we paid them exceeded the amount budgeted. That was,
Okay.
we had, the last few years, if you remember the last 2 years, we have increased the amount that we pay Post Fall sanitation based on the contract, but the city didn't pass that money on to the ratepayers. So when the budget came through, I just didn't increase the full amount of what we had for Post Fall sanitation. So this is why I need to true up what the budget reflects we actually pay the vendor.
Okay. And then your memo says 300 and this says 305. So I'm assuming this is the one where, actual number?
Let's see here. It's 305 is the number, yeah. That was the number that was advertised.
Steve?
I asked my same question on the sanitation. Is part of that increase due to the recycling costs?
No, the recycling costs are all part of the same. What happens is that fund, whatever we bill the customers, Post Falls gets a percentage of the monthly bill. And over the years, there's quite a large balance in that fund. And so what happens was there's only certain things I can spend that money on because it is designated fees. And so it has to be either go back as sanitation, or what we have been doing is put a portion of that over to the streets fund because the garbage trucks do put wear and tear on the streets. It does reimburse the general fund for staff time, but I'm very limited on what I can use that for. So whatever the fund balance was enough to cover the sanitation budget, if that makes sense.
Okay. Al?
Jason, I had a question on the last item, number 8, the park money.
Okay.
Why wasn't that included in our original budget? I mean, was that just oversight, or it's a lot of money?
That was something that, by the time the budget was put together, the fund balance, the amount of cash wasn't anticipated to come in this quickly. And so I know Dave and I know Brian had been working on a project list of what they wanted to complete for this fiscal year. And so it was kind of on a, wait and see when I do a budget amendment. When I do a budget amendment, I met with Dave and Brian to add to the budget amendment because there was projects they wanted to complete with the cash and reserves.
So I guess the other part of that is all of this money, this $5.6 million, this isn't coming from additional taxes or
No.
this is just coming from money that we've had in other fund balances. I know the situation with the police department was kind of an unusual situation.
Yeah, that wasn't budgeted either, but we had enough in reserves for that, yes.
So this is just all fund, this is money we've already had, not any kind of increase in taxes that, wow, we got more money than we needed, so we're going to spend
No,
some.
park impact fees are money that's collected by developers when they come and pull permits.
Right.
The 911, the vast majority of that was grant money, whether they received it this year or they received it in prior years. And also the general fund, the $500,000, that was ITD grant for the Idaho to Bay.
So when I see budget amendment number 1, that leads me to believe that there's going to be budget amendment number 2.
We do them as we come, but this was the only one I had, yeah.
Okay.
What do we, 3 or 4, 3 years?
Usually do 2 a year.
Yeah.
2 a year?
Yes, 2.
And I guess my question would be, these projects have all been approved by the council either prior year or this year?
I
and they just
believe,
carried
I'm not
forward?
sure of the one of the park impacts, but I'm sure that's on their list of parks to complete using those monies, because those have specific sources of, or specific uses when that money comes in. So as the money came in, they identified the parks and the projects they wanted to complete.
It's in the Park CIP master plan.
Okay.
But the one thing in there, there's $750,000 set aside for land acquisition.
That was in the, that's in a different fund. That's in this one, yes, sorry, I was thinking of I have a reserve fund for land acquisition also, but in this, on the detail that does show there's $700,000 for land acquisition, yes.
But you would have to come back to the council for approval to purchase additional land, correct?
Correct, and I'm not sure what all the 700,000 is. I believe a portion of that is if we move forward with the park and Liberty Bankers on that purchase, there's some dollars there that are committed out of park impact fees. I'm not sure what all of it is. I'd have to go back and look.
But if this is approved, that doesn't give staff authority.
Right, it doesn't give us authority just to write the check. So that particular purchase and any other land purchase would come before council for approval.
Okay.
Brian?
It would just omit the need for another budget amendment to be able to spend those dollars for this project. And that was one of the elements in there. And then the other one is the hope for a future dog park location. We don't have the parcel identified yet, but that's what we have kind of earmarked for that parcel. So it may or may not be expended in the current fiscal year, but we wanted to make sure we had the flexibility because we know it's a big need for our community right now.
That's kind of what I wanted to know, whether that was above, the 700,000 was above and beyond those that we've already talked about?
Yeah, the only one that's above and beyond would be that dog park location.
Good, good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
I don't think I'm going to give Jason an opportunity to rebut himself. So with that, I will close the public hearing. Council, how would you like to act?
I would move to approve the budget amendment number 1, fiscal year 2019.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Seeing none, Shannon, please take the roll.
Borders.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Malloy. Wolf.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Next up is unfinished business, and we have a couple items. Live after 5 at Tullamore Park. Brian again.
Mayor, Council, thank you. Here to present the Live After 5 contract. At the first meeting in February, we were directed to go back to work on this and bring it back with some revisions, and attempted to capture most of those in this contract that's before you today. The project proponent is here and present. He just got back in from a red-eye flight and is available also for comment or question if that may be needed. So just in general, this is a picture of what's going on with their established program in neighboring communities. So you kind of get an image of what we're looking at to be locating up there at Tullamore Park. So they are an experienced team with some brand recognition and some clout within the community and adjacent communities, and we have the ability to reach out to those other communities. I know the PD reached out and got feedback on what their experience is with this same proponent in Coeur d'Alene, and they've had no issues to speak of in that respect. They work with local businesses and business community for sponsorship of the activity. They do reach out to local vendors and have a priority to try to reach out to those Post Falls vendors that might be able to participate in their events first. And they are a for-profit organization. Event schedule, the park will be impacted from 8 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. on the day event. They bring their stage in starting at about 8:30. Set up their enclosure, their fencing area for the perimeter of their event between noon and 4, bringing in vendors and bringing their bands in and such. Gates open at 4:30. The event is scheduled to end. The concerts themselves are scheduled to end at 8:30 p.m. That's a big part of why Coeur d'Alene sees this as something that doesn't have a lot of impact on the neighboring community as it relates to sound. Vendor loadout, 9 p.m., band loadout, and that sort of thing, and the park is clear by 10:30 that evening. Kind of what this looks like for staff, what the impact is on city staff. The event provides the majority of the infrastructure as it relates to operating this event. They provide their own security staff to operate the facility inside of their reserved area. Our staff will be responsible for just generally policing the facility for trash and just consistency with the contract as it relates, so that we're ensuring that the operator is complying with the contract. We'll also be available for the sound monitoring and such. The event does wrap up at 8:30. We'll still be around as they begin to move vendors out, just to monitor and ensure that city facilities are kept in good repair. We do provide access to the facility, access to power, and then convenience facilities for the location and the inflatable / star stage cover, should the proponent want to use that. The contract terms, it's a 3-year term with an extension for 1 3-year, with an option for a 1 3-year long extension, a use fee of $500 per concert. Staff review of the layout and the event plan 45 days prior to the event. There's a added term based on our last discussion for a $500 damage deposit to be placed in park funds 5 days prior to their first event, and that'll retain until the director sees that the facility is in good condition and ready at the end of their reservation at the end of the season. Again, that setup 8 a.m. through about 10:30 p.m. everything's completely quiet. We did add some sound level considerations and the ability to add some flexibility to that at sound monitoring at the nearest residential unit in a residential zone. The park is in a commercial zoning designation within that PUD, just as a kind of a reference point. So everything towards Highway 41 is in a commercial zoning designation. Residential sits across Charleville to the west. There's some additional requirements to comply with KCFR's temporary vendor permits for tents and such, and access, so we'll provide them with that site plan to be able to get comments back. There was additional language added to the contract from the last time it was presented to secure additional off-site parking for large-scale events. And then there's discussion for cancellation, insurance, and some general boilerplate language that we do for events such as this. Those sound monitoring considerations, just to go into detail on what that looks like. Set a not-to-exceed level at the mixer, so at the soundboard of 95 decibels. In surveying other communities, what they do for this, they range anywhere from that 90, 95 up to 102, 105 range. Just kind of depends on community demand and characteristics of the neighborhood. We've got an 85 decibel requirement at the furthest property line, and that's consistent with what we do for Camelon Park reservations in the Grand Pavilion. That's identical language that we have for that facility, and also the Trailhead facility. We have an 85 decibel requirement at that location. The 80 decibel is something new and unique to this contract. It was also present in the Water Lantern Festival contract that we presented at the last meeting. So 80 decibels measured at the nearest residence in a residential zone. And following the event, after the 10:30 or after the 8:30 time frame, their sound levels are not to exceed 65 decibels. General traffic is just kind of a benchmark for measurement. Highway 41 at peak traffic flows is going to exceed 85 decibels, just ambient sound. 65 is pretty quiet. You'd probably be over that just stepping outside in front of City Hall with the freeway noise behind you. We added that damage deposit discussion that I had earlier. So Davis is responsible for providing staffing responsible to operate their event, minimum of 6 throughout their event, consisting of security / gate, that sort of thing. And they're to do what they can to minimize damage to the turf and park amenities and infrastructure. So we added additional language to point to that. It excludes damage caused by the general public, as that's what the park is there for, is the general public to be active and move around, so that they're not responsible for the damage or wear and tear that's related to pedestrian traffic flows throughout the facility. So our maintenance needs will have to offset that impact. And then, like I said, the damage deposit we've already discussed. That large ticketed event, this is not currently in the plans, as I know of, for the 2019 concert series. But should they decide to move on this for future years, the city would receive an additional $3 per ticket impact fee for the park to handle the additional traffic flow in around the facility. They would have additional time to be able to utilize the facility starting at Wednesday morning, running through Friday afternoon. So they'd have basically the park for 2 days. And they'd have to arrange for additional off-site parking and transportation and traffic control related to that. And that all of that information would have to be presented to the city ahead of our meet and confer meeting at the start of the concert season, in enough time to route that for comment to associated agencies and such that would want to provide direction to make a successful event. But with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions,
And
Brian?
like I said Mr. Davis is here available as well. Steve.
Yeah,
Steve's got a question.
Brian, the only question I have is under vendors, number 10, would be item C. As Davis will review all requests for items to be sold at the event and not allow items that may be dangerous or illegal. Is staff going to have any input into that too, or?
We don't
You know, that's kind of confusing to me that we have you have one person kind of deeming things illegal or dangerous, so.
Right.
So maybe Mr. David could explain, do we expect vendors to have anything dangerous or illegal, or?
And I'll be honest.
Who has the authority to say, would the police department have to step in and say, is this is a dangerous item or illegal, or is it just? I'm just kind of confused on that item.
Sure.
A little bit.
That was a term that was kind of left over from another agency that approved that same language, so we didn't dig into what that looks like in our operation. So it would be on them to provide that onerous on this.
What's the proponent's experience been with that
Judge, come forward.
topic?
And just name for the record, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tyler Davis, Davis Enterprises. No, it's a family-friendly community event. I don't know if anyone here has been to Live After 5 in Coeur d'Alene or not, but, we're going into year 7. I've done over 100 events over the last 7 years. We average almost 2,000 people a show last summer at our events. As it was pointed out earlier, never call for service of any sort, underage drinking, no violations, anything like that. So we take it fairly seriously. Not only that, but also in conjunction with the genre of music as well that we route in. It's pretty important for us. Not only for being family friendly, of course, but also the cost impact to us as well to insure an event like that. I might be surprised to know that reggae for some reason is the cheapest to insure as a promoter, whereas hip hop, rap, heavy metal, death metal, that sort of thing is far more expensive to insure. So we're pretty cautious of that. In terms of we can certainly take that language out or even add to police approval or anything like that. We certainly aren't going to allow people to sell any illegal products or endorse anything like that at our events. Other than that, I think it's just something that previous contracts have always had that language inside of it. So I think it's more of just kind of a buffer protection zone for the city.
You okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Wolf?
This isn't necessarily a question for you, Brian, but I guess it is in general. I might have asked this once before, but when we have like the consent calendar, and in this case, this contract, I'm assuming that you've reviewed all this. We don't have to ask that you've reviewed this, and
Yeah, so I've reviewed this one.
and just on the consent calendar, all those contracts.
Generically, I've seen them,
Okay.
yes, across the board.
With our new workflow program, he'll have to sign off on all of them to get on the agenda.
You'll see my initials.
I noticed that, there's, seems like more and more we see all these contracts and they're getting longer and more involved, and I certainly don't want somebody to come back and say, as a council member, I should be as informed as you are as an attorney to know if that contract's valid or anything like that.
That's why we have an in-house.
I know. I'd never ask him if he actually does review all that stuff.
Matter of fact, we
Asking
see a
him.
lot of things
We hope
that
so.
are approved where, I know when it comes to me for signature, it will say, reviewed and approved by council.
Yeah, cool. That's all yeah.
Good question. Any questions?
Actually, Mr. Davis, thank you for being here. I appreciate your presence. And
Yeah, no worries.
It's been a long day of travel for you, so thank you.
Yeah, we flew it about 27 hours ago from Istanbul. So.
Came back for the weather, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my wife was in tears actually. So,
Thank you for your time and your interest in the community.
oh, absolutely. No, thank you for having me.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Council, how would you like to act?
I would move that the City of Post Falls enter into an agreement with Davis Enterprises to host concerts at Tullamore Park.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Anthony?
Aye.
Malloy?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Wilhelm?
Aye.
Borders?
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next item up, thank you, Mr. Davis. Next item up is a contract agreement with TO Engineers for additional survey work of the community forest for annexation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. John Beecham, Public Works Director, presenting an additional services agreement as it pertains to the annexation survey for the community forest. As background, the overarching purpose of this project is to develop a legal description for the community forest in order to annex that into the city limits. The contract history is a little bit complicated on this one. We originally started a hydrogeologic study with TO Engineers for that same property prior to the desire to annex it, and TO happens to be good at surveying as well, so when we wanted to do survey work out there, it made sense to amend that first contract and have them do the legal description development for the annexation. As a little bit more background, the reason this is a complicated surveying project is probably best summarized with this picture. It's not a 5-acre parcel somewhere with nice straight lines on the sides. It's got a river involved, interlying properties that are excluded from the survey, and almost, I wouldn't say no straight lines, but very few straight lines. This is an example of some of the work they've been doing, just outlining one parcel and how it, so this is a preview of the future description, but trying to give an understanding of the level of difficulty this survey requires. TO brought to our attention an issue with the survey that was not captured in the initial scope of work estimate, and it's really dead center in this picture. There is a section corner where section lines should intersect neatly together on the same distance they do sort of throughout the prairie. What they found was an existing monument. I think it's 11.5 feet away from where it should be, and doing a little bit of due diligence for why that occurred. That monument has then been used to develop other property descriptions in this local area. The short summary of that is it is a lot less costly to the city to use the current monument as it sits in the field that all the other properties are described based off of. But what that means for TO is they need to document all of that historical chain of events that led to it being not where you would expect to find it based on the normal grid. Summarize that with some bullet points here. What they need to do is research into prior surveys. That monument was surveyed in a non-recorded survey by Freeman Smetana years ago. So there's records of this being surveyed that would have to be basically redone. That's where the costly element of it comes in. So they need to document all those discussions they've had with prior survey crews that they can still find, and basically bring the record forward on the legal description for when we go to the annexation process. As I mentioned, the proposed resolution is to incorporate that found corner into the survey and the legal description. We're also asking TO to assist us with some possible encroachments we've found elsewhere on that border. And what they will do is attend meetings with us and the landowners to basically to make sure everybody understands where the border is and help move that resolution along in a productive manner. That is not a large portion of this requested almost $6,000, but we did want to request that service at the same time. Cost on this project is allocated between parks and water reclamation based on the sort of the acquisition ownership of the community forest. So it's about $4,000 for water reclamation, not quite $2,000 for parks. I thought I'd include the original survey cost was $38,000. Any questions?
Questions? Mr. Beecham, Steve?
Yeah, can we bill the federal government for that amount for putting the survey marker in the wrong location?
Going back
Ask
to the
for
least
reimbursement.
costly approach, that may not work out well for us.
I love that question. You said 11 feet, 11.5 feet, the marker was off. Do we have any idea about how many, like, square feet, or are we going to be losing an acre, 10 acres?
So
50 square feet?
I don't know the number. It's probably closer to the 50 square feet.
Okay.
So the property line, is actually, can you see my mouse on the picture here? So if it's 11 feet here from the corner, it is the triangle from this edge of the property line to this point right here. So 50 feet is closer than an acre. I don't know what the exact number is, but worth noting, we did make sure that there's no critical trail access for parks on this or anything like that. So it is not a consequential loss either.
I would certainly encourage you to keep going with that cost-effective resolution versus, oh, wait a minute, that's our land and my gosh, we want it back or whatever.
Seeing no further questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve the contract amendment with TO Engineers for additional survey work of the community forest for annexation.
Second. Motion seconds. Further discussion? Jenna, please take the roll.
Wolf.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, John. Next item up, citizens issue, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding a city-related issue that is not on the agenda. Anyone wishes to speak, come forward and we'll let you talk. Bob.
Bob Flowers. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. An issue tonight that's not really on the agenda, but it was mentioned by the mayor earlier, is the snow removal here in town. It's been a challenging year for everybody, the city, the residents, everybody. And thank goodness a lot of people have pulled together and tried to work together. I found out today that in fact, the police department are now tagging these vehicles that nobody seems to want to move. Thank goodness. I believe in tag and drag. Those are my words, not the police department's words. But because these folks are obviously don't want to work with us. But what I would like to suggest to maybe make some improvements, because we all agree that there are a few things that could be improved in this process, is that maybe you try to form a small citizens council, maybe from each one of the districts, a person from each of these districts that you have, that you've divided the town up into the way that they're plowing. Somebody that would be willing to go out and talk to their neighbors, because no two neighborhoods are the same. You know, my neighborhood, we have no sidewalks, so we don't care if they throw the snow right up on our front lawns, because we're not using them, it's covered with snow. Where other neighborhoods have sidewalks everywhere, and they try to keep them clear so people can walk up and down. And other different problems there are in different neighborhoods, like ones that have a bunch of those cul-de-sacs in them that are almost impossible to plow. Well, I don't believe that our street folks, one person can actually know everything that's going on in this town at any given moment. And I believe that a small citizens group or whatever that could advise him what any special needs or special areas in the town or in their section of town that should be looked at or addressed or taken into consideration. Anyway, it was just an idea, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks for taking into consideration. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, the next item up is new business. We have none tonight, followed by ordinances and resolutions. We have none. Administrative staff reports.
We have none tonight, sir.
Like the trend. Under mayor comments, I just want to extend congratulations to Coach Pete Reardon and the Post Falls High School wrestling team, and they've created quite the program. And 2 years, two consecutive back-to-back state championships. I think it's two.
4 of the last 5, right?
Yeah, 4 of the last 5. And I apologize, I forget the gentleman's name that had a undefeated in high school with a record of 563,000, and this kid's record was 100-something. So
Yeah,
what an accomplishment. And also to the boys basketball team who went down with a very young team and came back, I think, third place trophy. So great showing for a very young team, and having been involved in state tournaments and state championship, doing that well with a group of young kids is pretty impressive. So my compliments to the coaches there and to the kids. Other than that, I just want to thank people for continuing to work with us on the snow plowing. I've heard, I'm not sure when, but tonight, tomorrow, we're supposed to get more.
Yep.
What a joy. But again, we're working at learning from how we're operating this year, and I want to again thank staff for the job they're doing, and thank people like Bob who bring forth recommendations and help us make this a better place. And it's interesting, I haven't heard it too much this year, but quite often I hear about how Post Falls streets are horrible compared to Coeur d'Alene and Spokane. Well, I've had the occasion to drive both over the last couple days, and they face the same issues we do. So It's a challenge for everybody in the neighborhood, and I guess that's why they call it North Idaho, because it snows here a lot. So, again, thanks to everyone who's been involved. Council comments?
I would just like to echo what you said, Mr. Mayor, in regards to Bob's suggestion. I think that's a great idea, and I really, again, thank you as a citizen for coming forward. I wish more citizens would come forward with ideas and feedback for the city. I just think that the feedback that we can get from the citizens is huge, and I think that they come up with some great ideas, of which Bob had a good one tonight. So, thank you, Bob.
With that, we do not need an executive session,
We do not.
so the next motion is?
Adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.